the reason I travel, I think, is because Poland is becoming maybe more and more visible, I think. So just forgive me this personal note, but I have to tell you that I'm sort of a product of the Polish transition. I'm exactly this age that I was able to travel from zero to hero in a way. So in the 80s, when I was a child, I remember when I was 6, we didn't know what chocolate was. The shelves at stores were empty. My brother would eat a banana sent in a parcel by my aunt from Germany for an hour. He would munch on it for an hour just to, revel in the taste. So we had nothing, and now we're quite a successful country, changed, a modern one. And in that change, which happened 25 years ago, the Church, the Catholic Church, did play an important role. This is what I want to talk to you about today. The role that the Catholic Church played cannot be assessed in normative terms, I think, because this role could also be seen as negative by some and as positive by others, so I will explain that. But I want to start with an illustration. So in 1990, it's already a year after the Round Table Agreement, a French Catholic weekly, La Vie, put the following title on their front page. It said, "Faith brings down regimes." The weekly surveyed Poles, Hungarians and Russians in Moscow only, asking them if religion played a big role in democratizing the system in the countries. And 73% of Poles said it played an important role, while 23% were of a different opinion. Only 48% of Hungarians would say that that role was important, and only 28% of the inhabitants of Moscow would be of the same opinion. So the response of Poles to the question put forward by La Vie points to the important role of the Catholic Church in the Polish transition. So as much as the Church helped to ease the transitional tensions in 1989, it also became one of the biggest institutionalized beneficiaries of that transition. The Church was instrumental as part of the pre-1989 opposition in Poland. For most of the communist era, albeit in the opposition to the regime, it could function fairly autonomously until it engaged in political and social debate, mainly after 1978 when a Pole became Pope. The Church joined the Round Table in 1989 as an observer, mediator and guarantor. It gave, on the one hand, solidarity a security valve against accusations from anti-communist radicals. So there were anti-communist radicals also, who would later see the talks as betrayal. And on the other hand, it gave the ruling side, the communists, guarantees that what was agreed would be respected. The Church also supported subsequent reforms and overall gave the revolution a moral flavor. Already in April 1989, a bill regulating church-state relations was agreed, but not yet put to a vote, not yet then put to a vote. The Church had a legal status, the freedom of religious operation and organization, the right to its own TV and radio stations, cinemas and theaters, and the right to regain the property, this is the most important part, the right to regain the property taken by the communist rule. This way, the Polish Church got much more than, for example, in Czechoslovakia from the Václav Klaus central rightist government. In the June 1989 parliamentary elections, formally the Church was to remain uninvolved, but in reality, priests in their parishes often instructed people in their sermons how to vote or which list to sign. The Church supported General Wojciech Jaruzelski for the president, and later the head of the Catholic Church in Poland chose Mazowiecki as the best out of 3 candidates for the prime minister. It is hard to say, however, if his voice was decisive, but certainly he was consulted, so the Church was consulted on political matters. Generally then, in the pre-1989 period, the Church adopted one major rule. Avoid confrontation with the communists, engage in dialogue as long as the crucial principle of the church autonomy is upheld. However, as much as the church unified the Polish people before 1989, its role and position in a secular country or in a secularizing country after 1989 became a divisive issue. Mostly because Poles did not really want to see it play a bigger role, as big a role as it played. The same survey in La Vie, 1990, also asked the respondents if they thought that priests should engage in political activities to defend democracy and freedom. And in response, only 36% of Poles said yes, 55% said no. Now, a small part about the post-1989 gains for the Catholic Church. And forgive me if there will be some incursions of the Middle East here, because it's sort of natural. I am a political scientist and an Arabist by training, so I also tried to look, and have tried since 2011, to look at the Middle East and Poland in a comparative perspective, also when it comes to religion, although I'm pretty sure there will be you have a lot of objections to this comparison altogether. Anyway, in 1989 the Catholic Church emerged as a primary single player in Polish public life. A primary single unified player. Very visible and potent, often imposing its doctrine on formal solutions, either directly or indirectly. As a direct example, in 1990, religion began to be taught in public schools, and in 1993, abortion was made illegal. In 1993, a concordat was signed with the Vatican, a document that usually recognizes the Catholic Church, which is also the biggest benefiter of the accord in terms of legal and financial profits. In compensation for what was taken from the Church before 1989, the so-called Property Commission gave the Church $50 million and more than 66,000 hectares of land of a value impossible to estimate. Most often, these places, the property is in the very center of the biggest cities in Poland. So you can imagine the value of it. So these were the immediate gains for the Church. One example of the indirect imposition of Catholic discourse was the difficulties of the subsequent Polish ombudsman after the transition. There were two of them, Professor Ewa Łętowska and Tadeusz Zieliński, never mind the names. They served this function precisely when religion energetically re-emerged in public life. They defended the secular character of the new state and the rights of non-believers engaging in heated debates over issues such as teaching religion in public schools or displaying religious symbols in public places. The rightist parties even sought to curb the ombudsman's prerogatives. Eventually, the differences of opinion on social issues with a religious background further divided the new political elites, who were once a unified anti-communist conglomerate. So I hope it is clear now to you how important the Catholic Church in Poland was and still is, but this role is diminishing. I will show how. Now just a word about the parallels with the Arab world. In fact, if one compares the Polish and Arab transitions, one may come to a conclusion that after a revolution in a society where religion had been repressed in one form or another, its role will usually be emphasized in the new system. This is only natural. Such, of course, is and was the case in Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, other countries, indirectly also affected by the riots like Morocco. They have seen the rise of Islamic parties. The question I am asking myself, actually, looking at the two examples of Ennahda in Tunisia and the Freedom and Justice Party in Egypt, is there really a significant ideological difference between the two? Because they ended up in a completely different place. Now they're in the opposite political places, so to speak. And actually, this is what we are studying as part of a project that IEMed had initiated, and I am co-responsible for this part of religion in transitional processes. And what we found is that it is more logical to argue that political circumstances decide the fate of religious parties rather than differences in their ideology. If it is not about religious principles then, and I would claim that it is not, even if one would argue that Islam is a deen, dawla wa dunya, and there is no separation of law and the state in Islam, I would still argue that it is not about religious principles. But if it is not about religious principles, how does a political party fit in a democratic order? What are the concrete challenges for a state? So a democratic order in Western political thought requires that the church be separated from the state, primarily for the sake of inclusiveness of the latter. The Arab world is religiously diverse, often numerous denominations, both Muslim and Christian, coexist within a country, which logically calls for a secular system, just so as not to deprive a minority of their rights. In order to assess how much of religion in a political program and system does not compromise the foundations of freedom and tolerance, let us look at Poland again. A religious and democratic country at the same time, a flawed democracy according to the Economist Democracy Index. But the following examples that I will show, there will be a couple of them, 7, but very short ones, will I hope help to estimate the level of safe religious presence in a democratic political order. Example number 1 is the invocation to God in the preamble, and I want to show the Polish preamble to you now. I will just read part of it. The preamble is very important because it's a product of a consensus, but a consensus that was a vehement and fiery debate led to this consensus. Just by reference to what was said before by Charles, I think, about the length of the constituent process in Spain, which lasted, if I remember correctly, 18 months, you said. So in Poland, the revolution is 1989. The constituent process lasts for 3 years, and in 1992 we only come up with a small constitution, whereas the proper new constitution is adopted in 1997, so 8 years after the transitional period. So you can see how strenuous the process was. Please take a look at this marvelous, in my opinion, consensus as for church and state in the preamble. We, the Polish nation, all citizens of the Republic, both those who believe in God as the source of truth, justice, good and beauty, as well as those not sharing such faith, but respecting those universal values as arising from other sources. Beholden to our ancestors for their labors, their struggle for independence, achieved a great sacrifice for our culture, rooted in the Christian heritage of the nation and in universal human values. So it's a preamble for everyone. You know, everyone can find himself, herself in this text, which makes it very valuable to us Poles. We like it. So my point here is that invocation to God in the preamble, or lack thereof, is less important than the constitutional process itself, of course. If it follows the rules that Nathalie Bernon-Mauguiron explained it should follow, then the result should be good. Example number 2, the indication in the Constitution that Sharia or other religious law be a foundation of state legislature only matters in as much as it is practical, as it has practical influence over the jurisdiction of the courts. There is no such indication in the Polish constitution, but on the 28th of July 1993, the Concordat was signed between the Vatican and Poland, as I said, and according to Article 12, religion was introduced to schools in accordance with the principles that the parents decide upon their children's upbringing. It also stipulated that a canonical marriage has almost the same legal effects as a civilian marriage. The Concordat was signed by a transitional government when the parliament was dissolved by the president, which also stirred controversy whether the government had the necessary legitimacy. Concordat became law in 1998. So you also see that there is an intrusion of religion in the Polish law. a very clear one. Example number 3. Religion promotes certain values and hence can influence the legal system, but it cannot limit citizens' freedoms. In Poland in 1990s, the Catholic Church influenced the right, who accentuated the role and rights of the family and the nation, not the state or the individual. The characteristic is yet another analogy with what Islam prioritizes, the ummah, the Muslim family, the community, as opposed to individualistic liberal thought. And so abortion, as I already mentioned, was made illegal in Poland in 1993 as a result of church activism, a direct result. Example number 4. Religious classes or religion classes, religious instruction in public schools and religious elements in the school curricula do not improve tolerance or democracy or religiosity. So if you look at the numbers, and as I said, 1990 the Catholic religion was introduced in public schools with 2 classes a week for the whole period of 12 years. But if you look at the numbers, there have been fewer and fewer churchgoers. So in early 1990s, 70%, and this is according to church statistics, 70% of Poles would go to Sunday masses. Today, only 40% of people go to church, even with this religious instruction at schools. Another example, religious signs in public places can be considered offensive, and this is surely the case in Poland with one very particular example. Since 1997, there is a cross hanging on the wall in the Polish parliament. It was put up there unofficially at night by 2 right-wing parliamentarians, but no one dares to take it off the same way, so it stayed there, you know. So even though 70% of Poles were in 2011 in favor of it hanging there, 20% still would like it to be taken off. If the cross had not been put up there and a major state institution would remain free of religious designates, there would be no need to engage in a fiery debate about taking it off, which would be indeed a strong, almost anti-Catholic statement in itself for some. So the debate is still going on, and particularly one party in Poland has as an important part of its agenda the gist of taking it off, that cross. So now and then we have a cross debate in Poland. Another example, religious invocations in public speeches. These invocations, in my opinion, do not compromise democracy as long as they are not derogatory. But they can and often are populist. Such references are commonly used, of course, by presidents of the United States, and also Polish politicians on both sides of the political spectrum play on the religious sentiments of Poles. For example, some politicians will go to the church to be shown, just to be shown, attending masses, to appeal to the more rightist constituency. And final example, the sermons. And also the khutbahs, actually. They have a direct impact on how people think and what they do politically. For example, in Poland, on the occasion of the 2003 referendum, which asked if Poland should join the European Union, the bishops wrote a letter based on the words of Pope John Paul II to be read out as sermons during the Sunday Mass to convince people to vote yes. The bishops, that's the hierarchy up there, wanted the priests, smaller priests in their parishes, to convince the people to vote yes. But some ultra-conservative and rightist priests chose not to read it at all, not to read it as a sermon. This example shows that, in fact, there are 2 churches in the Catholic Church. There is the episcopate, the authorities of the church, and there are the parishes, the priests, who to a large extent remain independent, free to say, advocate, promote whatever they see fit. This sort of relates to the division between official Islam and unofficial Islam, the popular Islam proposed by Maxime Rodinson. So maybe I'll go to the conclusions, because I might be speaking already too long. I do think, and I don't want you to get me wrong, that religion is a very significant part of our lives. I mean, there's a natural, I think, inclination of a human being towards spirituality of some sort. It can be religion, I don't know, it can be a rock group that a teenager follows, or a football club, whatever. This kind of sentiment fulfills this need for a religious sort of higher feeling, I think. And of course, religion has been a significant factor in political transitional processes, naturally, in the post-World War II period. From the Indian Peninsula to Central and Eastern Europe. In Asia, there are numerous examples of transitions in countries with Muslim majority and minorities: India, Pakistan, Indonesia, Malaysia. In Europe, there are already various levels of secularization of political systems, roughly with France on the one end of the spectrum as very secularized, and on the other end there's Poland and Ireland, I guess, or Italy, other countries. The case of religious Poland, which had recently gone through a transition, is of particular interest, I think. But also there are other examples of similarly democratic and religious countries. In the Middle East, even, Israel is a democracy with active religious parties such as Shas, an ultra-Orthodox party that advocates a state run according to the Jewish law. And still, Israel has remained a very pluralistic society. So overall then, regardless of the kind of religion, which is important, regardless of the kind of religion, religious societies can and should form democratic systems of power. The following is a list of religious societies and their countries' ranking in the Economist Democracy Index. So Ireland is ranked 13, Italy 32, Greece 33, Israel 37, India 38, Poland 44, Indonesia 53, Malaysia 64, Turkey 88. Unfortunately, Arab countries only start with Tunisia in 90 and end with Saudi Arabia in 163 and Syria even less than this. So in Poland, secularization came, that's my conclusion, in Poland secularization came with time. A new generation was brought up in a different system and a richer society. Simultaneously, the Church had struggled to find its, and has struggled to find its proper place in the public sphere. Less and less people go to church on Sundays. This process was already predicted in the transitional period. Polish sociologists in 1990 posed the following question: is the Polish Church ready to confront a pluralistic liberal society based on rules of competition? I guess Islam should be asked the same question. In short, in Poland, changes in the relationship between religion and the state occurred out of one, demographic, and two, economic necessity. The former is there in the Arab world. More than 70% of its inhabitants are less than 30 years old. But the latter, the economic change, is not there. There is certainly no promise of a better future, of a better living, of a better economic future, which eventually may make changes in the sensitive region state due or slower. Neither the state nor religion, and certainly nor the society, remain constant, though, which make the changes certain to occur, in my opinion, even if slowly.